An elderly woman fell unconscious on the spot after getting dosed with China's homegrown vaccine. She suffers from high blood pressure, diabetes, and asthma, but still was made to get the jab. Dozens of Chinese sailors stuck on a cargo ship after testing positive for the CCP virus. The first of them to get sick was also the vaccinated person on board. A section of the world's biggest port shuts down after one confirmed virus case was detected. A mother in tears, begging for food to feed her child. Lockdown orders kept her inside and isolated from grocery stores, while local food delivery was suspended. And a herd of wild elephants is finally heading home after wandering around in southern China for more than a year. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Harsh lockdown measures continue to affect every individual in China. Meanwhile, Chinese-made vaccines appear to cause more trouble. But first, we take a look at a herd of wild elephants in China. Today is World Elephant Day. A herd of wild elephants is finally heading home after wandering about in southern China for more than a year. The 14 wild elephants walked hundreds of miles, heading to their protected habitat in southwest China's Yunnan province. Chinese wildlife protection officials said the elephants had safely crossed a bridge, heading south towards a nature reserve. The wild animals are being guided back home using artificial roads, corn trees as bait, and electric fencing. For months, the elephants have captured the imagination of the public, but they actually started their trip as early as last spring. At the time, the group of elephants set out from home together. During the journey, 3 left the group, and 2 more were born along the way. After 800 miles of walking, the animals are nearing home. This also came as a relief for the local residents. Videos show the elephants walking on the streets and intruding on farmers' homes for food. As for the question, why did they set off for such a long journey? There are several possible answers, but they could have been looking for more food. Will they or other wild elephants begin another adventure like this anytime soon? We are yet to find out. Many Chinese citizens are experiencing extreme adverse reactions after getting inoculated with China's homegrown vaccines. One Chinese resident tells us her story of her mother-in-law falling unconscious on the spot after being forced to get vaccinated. NTD's Don Ma has more.
In China's Gansu province, an elderly woman fell unconscious and was hospitalized after getting inoculated with the domestic CCP virus vaccine. Her son tried to hold relevant parties accountable, but was instead beaten by Chinese authorities. The woman, Ms. Niu, reportedly suffers from high blood pressure, diabetes, and asthma. There are concerns whether elderly people suffering from chronic conditions should get the vaccine in the first place. Ms. Niu's daughter-in-law, Ms. Guo, tells us what happened.
It was August 4th. That day, the township government sent people over. In our area, we are forced by circumstance to get the vaccine. My mother-in-law was taken to get the shot too. After getting the shot, adverse reactions developed immediately, like vomiting. She immediately fell unconscious. Then the township cadres sent her to the hospital.
Guo says the authorities didn't even inform her that her mother-in-law was sent to the hospital.
She's 60, 70 years old. Authorities didn't contact us about her adverse reactions or condition. My husband found out about it. The authorities never reached out to us.
Guo said her mother-in-law's condition was critical.
At the time my husband arrived at the hospital, my mother-in-law was in serious condition. Aside from being unconscious, she was shaking nonstop. My husband became anxious. He went to look for someone in charge. The township government didn't acknowledge him. Nobody cared. He was left just standing there.
Her husband had a verbal spat with township authorities. He wanted her mother to be transferred to another hospital. That's when Guo's husband was beaten. Around 20 individuals came. Guo says the mayor took the lead in beating him. Guo's husband has liver cirrhosis. He was hospitalized after the beating. Now both Guo's mother-in-law and her husband are both in the hospital. Guo tells us how authorities at the time convinced her mother-in-law to get the vaccine.
The township government told my mother-in-law, even people who have cancer can get the vaccine. You don't have cancer, so of course you can get it. So she followed them to get the shot.
Guo's mother-in-law has now regained consciousness, but she is still not in good condition. There are many stories of extreme adverse reactions to vaccines in China. Another mainland China citizen tells us her 65-year-old relative died only 10 minutes after getting inoculated. Don Ma, NTD News.
Chinese authorities are enforcing harsh lockdowns, impacting even the most basic necessities of life for some. A child asked their mother, would they starve to death at home during quarantine? It's happened before in Yangzhou City, in the province neighboring Shanghai. A tweet from Tuesday shows a mother in an online group chat for her neighborhood. She's crying and begging for food for her children. She says they only have rice porridge and salt. All the other food from their last purchase is finished. She says she ordered groceries several times, but authorities stopped the delivery services. They said it's to prevent the spread of the virus. The family has been eating rice porridge 3 meals a day for almost a week. The mother sighs, asking why it's so difficult in Yangzhou. She says her child's question made her feel even worse.
我家孩子说：“妈妈，我想吃肉，能不能出去给我买点肉吃？我们会不会死在家？”我说：“不会的。”
Then she begged other residents to send them some vegetables.
小孩天天的吃盐巴酒稀饭，可怜了我的孩子。
She said she tried to go to a grocery store, but security wouldn't let her out.
想出去了，保安都不跟我出去买菜。我们只能死在家饿死，是不是？你们知道呀？能不能帮忙送点菜给我们吃吗？
Finally, she cried in desperation, begging for food once again. Residents of the same neighborhood then promised to give her some food. Virus outbreaks in China continue to rattle the economy, and the country's largest shipping port in Zhejiang province is affected. On Wednesday, a terminal in Zhoushan port announced all operations there would be suspended. This is after a worker tested positive for the virus. Authorities didn't say when they would resume operations. China's Ministry of Transport says the port has ranked #1 globally for 12 consecutive years. In that time, 1 billion tons of goods passed through it. The affected terminal accounts for a fifth of all containers passing through the port. Operations at other terminals remain normal. The worker who tested positive has been vaccinated with 2 doses of China's domestic shots. According to officials, he had come into close contact with more than 200 people. 20 Chinese sailors were stuck on a cargo ship for about 10 days after testing positive for the CCP virus. Under pressure from public opinion, most were taken to land for treatment. The crew of the ship Grand Progress repeatedly asked to land in a port of the coastal city of Zhoushan, but the request was ignored. The authorities also warned vessels from other shipping companies not to get close nor to rescue. The crew had adrift for almost 10 days, with the infected sailors in critical condition. The first sailor to test positive at the end of July was the only vaccinated person on board. Days later, all crew began to show symptoms of the CCP virus, until more than half became too weak to work. The sailors were forced to go online for help. Under public pressure, a coastal city finally agreed to transfer some of the most severe cases to land for treatment. A sailor described his experience in recent days as jail. He says the increasing sense of torture made their symptoms much worse. Some people began to vomit, some lost their sense and taste of smell, and some needed oxygen machines. The cargo ship was transporting coal from the Philippines to China when they discovered the virus halfway. There's heated debate in China over comments a prominent Chinese virologist made recently. He says China needs to learn to coexist with the virus. Chinese state-run media is generally against the idea. Meanwhile, many academics say it should at least be discussed from a scientific standpoint. Some Western scientists also say in the future, society may still need to coexist with the virus. Recently, CCP mouthpiece Global Times published an article rejecting the idea. It urged Chinese people not to get caught up in Western narratives. It argued that asking China to live with the virus is a step backwards. The Global Times article comes on the heels of another article from the People's Daily. That outlet also criticized the idea, labeling it as definitely not feasible. Authorities even detained a teacher for 2 weeks for supporting the idea online. But many Chinese scholars say the concept shouldn't be dismissed so quickly and that it shouldn't be politicized. Criticism should instead be based on science and come from the medical field. Some argue that the opinions of the general public shouldn't eclipse scientists' opinions, and that people should believe science, not propaganda. A well-known Chinese vascular surgeon said on Chinese social media platform Weibo that humans will have to coexist with viruses. Now we turn to China's power supply. Despite Beijing promising to reduce carbon emissions, the country is ramping up coal production to meet its surging power demands. Last week, China restarted 38 shuttered coal mines in Inner Mongolia. Officials also authorized another 15 coal mines across the north to have another year of operation. These coal mines are expected to produce at least 40 million tons of coal every year. The move comes as China sees its coal prices hit record levels. The extreme summer heat brought a strong demand for power supply, but the country's electricity providers are struggling to keep up. And under these circumstances, top officials are advocating scaling back measures to cut carbon emissions. President Joe Biden plans to host a virtual summit of democracy in December. The White House says the initiative will bolster faith in democratic governance and defend against authoritarianism around the globe. Here's more.
The White House announced Wednesday that President Joe Biden will convene a virtual summit for democracy on December 9th and 10th. In a briefing, the State Department explained the summit would bring democratic leaders together to counter the rising authoritarian forces around the globe.
The Summit for Democracy reflects President Biden's deeply held belief that in order to tackle the world's most pressing challenges, democracies must come together, learn together, stand together, and act together.
The White House announcement says the December summit will galvanize commitments and initiatives across three principal themes: defending against authoritarianism, fighting corruption, and promoting respect for human rights. The Biden administration will plan a second face-to-face gathering in 1 year to review each country's progress toward commitments. The action is widely seen as a face-off against the Chinese Communist Party and its leader, Xi Jinping. In his recent speeches, Xi vowed to see the ruling totalitarian party in China shape mankind's future through socialism.
The Chinese regime is threatening the head of a private art school in San Francisco to cause her to resign, but she's not planning to give up. Here's NTD's Eileen Eng with more details.
Half a block from Golden Gate Park is the San Francisco High School of the Arts. It is a private art school for middle and high school students. It also offers dance, music, and visual arts courses. A group of Bay Area parents founded the school in 2010, hoping their children would learn more traditional arts. But recently, the principal, Sherry Zhang, said the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, threatened her parents.
So the national security officers visited them and threatened that if I don't stop being the principal and head of school of San Francisco High School of the Arts, then they may forcefully close down my parents' enterprise, and they may even go to jail.
The CCP is threatening Zhang because she practices a spiritual discipline called Falun Dafa. Under CCP rule, practitioners are tortured and killed for their beliefs. Zhang's parents are not Falun Dafa practitioners, but she said her parents are in danger of losing their business of 30 years.
They've been hardworking and honest business people, and they invest so much into their business. So, of course, they don't want it to close down, and it has been detrimental for them.
But Zhang doesn't plan on giving up the school because she is one of the founders.
And we are here to teach students to have perseverance. We also teach them, because through traditional art training, they learn to work hard, they learn to not giving in, and they learn to persevere, they learn to have self-discipline. So all of the values that we are teaching our students, they learning through the traditional art training, is exactly what I also need to maintain during this incident.
The school's mission is to provide students with an exceptional education in traditional arts and academics while focusing on character development, so that they may positively contribute to the world. Zhang believes that having a good education that passes down culture and knowledge is important for future society. Eileen Eng, NTD News, California.
A Confucius Institute in the U.S. is under investigation. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita announced he is looking into ties between his state's Valparaiso University and the institutes funded by Beijing. Rikita says his investigation seeks to uncover whether the Chinese regime has attempted to exert political influence and manipulate the attitudes and beliefs of hosers through their Confucius Institutes. He has issued a civil investigative demand to the private Christian university. He did this to see whether it violated the Higher Education Act of 1965. The school has been hosting Confucius Institute since 2008. According to the Attorney General, the university reported that it received more than $1 million from the Chinese regime between 2010 and 2019. It's not exactly clear how the school has used the funding. The university denies any wrongdoing, saying it is and always has been transparent and compliant in reporting its funding. Now we look to country's response to a recent diplomatic row involving Beijing when it expelled Lithuania's envoy and recalled its own ambassador after the European country strengthened its ties with Taiwan. The U.S. said it stands with Lithuania and condemned Beijing's retaliatory actions.
We support our European partners and our allies as they develop mutually beneficial relations with Taiwan and resist the PRC's coercive behavior. Taiwan is a global leader in public health and advanced manufacturing and democratic governance, to name just a few areas in which the international community, including the United States, benefits from engagement with Taiwan.
Beijing's move is seen as a warning to other European countries that welcome warmer ties with Taiwan. A spokesperson of the European Union said, "We regret the Chinese action and are following developments closely," adding, "Fundamentally, this is a bilateral matter between China and Lithuania." The breakup comes after Lithuania allowed Taiwan to open an office or de facto embassy there. But what upset Beijing the most is that the office would be under the name of Taiwan. That makes Lithuania the first European country to allow the democratic island to have its office under its name. The Chinese regime claims Taiwan as part of mainland China. Any of Taiwan's diplomatic ties could upset Beijing. And under pressure from Beijing, only 15 countries in the world recognize Taiwan. In Europe, the self-ruled island could only set up de facto embassies under the name of Taipei City, the capital of Taiwan. Lithuania, however, says it regrets Beijing's decision to retaliate, but that it's a sovereign state and it will decide for itself with which states to develop relations. The British government says China's largest gene company must register its prenatal test with UK regulators if it wants to keep offering products in Britain. The company has been accused of collecting genetic data from millions of women around the world and of sharing it with the Chinese Communist regime. NTD's Trevor Piper has the details.
Chinese company BGI's genetic screening tests are currently available for sale in the UK. But Britain's medical regulator, MHRA, says these devices have not been registered. Junior Health Minister James Bethell says registration will be required from the 1st of September. It was previously reported that BGI Group developed its prenatal tests in collaboration with China's military. It uses them to collect genetic data from millions of women around the world, including in the UK. Some politicians expressed concerns over the company's links with the Chinese military. Conservative MP Tom Tugendhat says he fears the Chinese regime may be using the data to gain an advantage over other countries. But BGI says it produced the tests on its own and it has never shared data for national security or defense purposes. Trevor Piper, NTD News.
Apple says it will refuse demands from governments to use its child safety technology for surveillance. But security experts have concerns over the system, which would involve scanning iPhone photos before they're uploaded to the cloud. A security expert tells NTD's Jane Worrell about the potential risks.
Apple faces criticism for its plans to scan images of photo libraries on iPhones for known images of child abuse. The technology is first being used in the United States before plans for a wider rollout across the world. Professor Ross Anderson says it's prudent to be suspicious.
So what Apple has come up with is a system whereby your photos will be scanned on your iPhone before they are even encrypted and uploaded to the iCloud. And by this means, Apple hopes to diffuse, I believe, the criticism that they're not going to make iCloud contents available to the FBI for scanning. However, the result will be much worse because what they're doing is to embed into everybody's iPhone a mechanism whereby photos and other material can be scanned for stuff that is sensitive according to some list that the government might set from time to time.
One of the big concerns is how this technology could be used by authoritarian governments to silence dissent.
Well, the precedent actually goes to China, because in 2008, the government in Peking insisted that every PC sold in the country have software installed in it called Green Dam. And this was described as a pornography filter, but what it was actually doing was searching for words of interest to Ministry of State security officials, such as Falun Gong and Dalai Lama, on everybody's PCs in China. And the initial implementation had a bug in that it made people's computers insecure, and anybody running the Green Dam software could have their computer taken over by any website they visited. China scanned stuff in iCloud for iPhone users because they insisted that Apple hold all the iCloud storage at 3 data centers in China operated by a state-owned company. So in authoritarian countries, that battle is already lost. But the interesting things that we're likely to see with Apple, for example, is that Apple has said that they won't put any images other than the American images into their database. But the Australians, for example, have a law which says that the Australian government can use such mechanisms for its own purposes. And there's no way that the UK would tolerate iPhones only looking for images of missing children in America. The UK is going to insist that iPhones look for photos of missing children in the UK instead.
He also says there are problems with the algorithm.
There are serious issues about what the Apple neural match algorithm, as it's called, is looking for. It looks very much like a face recognition algorithm. So rather than looking for nakedness or genitalia or things like that, it's probably looking for the faces of both perpetrators and victims. And this means that quite a lot of the time when an alarm goes off and the person at Apple sees an adult with their clothes on, you can't just dismiss that as a false alarm, because this might either be a survivor of abuse or a perpetrator. And so they're going to have to build machinery to report to law enforcement, and law enforcement will build machinery to deal with that. And that then translates very, very easily to a circumstance in which you start putting persons of interest to the security service, or in an authoritarian country, you might put known dissidents or opposition leaders or banned religious leaders. And then the whole thing does actually become rather nightmarish.
Since facing the criticism, Apple has said it will refuse to comply with government demands to detect images that are not child sexual abuse material. But it hasn't all been criticism for Apple. Some children's charities and the UK government praised Apple's move. The Health Secretary supported it, tweeting he's delighted to see Apple taking meaningful action and that it's time for Facebook to follow their example. Apple says this programme is ambitious and protecting children is an important responsibility. These efforts will evolve and expand over time. Jane Warraw, NTD News, London.
Now we turn to a question from some of our newer viewers. Why does NTD call the coronavirus the CCP virus? Last year, at the very beginning of the pandemic, NTD had already started using the term. Back then, our evening news anchor, Stephania Cox, explains why.
The Chinese regime's propaganda arm is trying to shift the blame for the virus pandemic, even though it was the regime's cover-up and mismanagement that allowed the virus to spread throughout China and create a global pandemic. To keep this fact clear for our audience, we will now call it the CCP virus, short for Chinese Communist Party virus.
And that's all for today's China in Focus. Thanks for watching and see you tomorrow.